successful and a holding against at all times.
Be careful!
Government officials insist that this is isolated and significant of the packet for anyone. Okay. No, perhaps.
Summer of 1995. The low rumble of thunder is heard in the distance. The gentle hum of coqui frogs echoes through the humid night air, and a faint breeze rustles through the palm trees, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and salt from the nearby coast. Seemed like an ordinary Puerto Rican night, except that summer something extraordinary had come to the island. Something unnatural. For weeks, strange reports had begun to circulate among the farmers and ranchers of Canavanas. Livestock were turning up dead, completely drained of their blood, their bodies eerily untouched apart from small puncture wounds at their throat. Dogs refused to go near the carcasses. Even the scavengers, the vultures, and stray cats kept their distance. It was as if something had pulled the very essence from the animals and left behind only husks. Some whispered about satanic cults. Others spoke of government experiments gone wrong, but in hushed voices, beneath flickering porch lights, there was another rumor, one even more terrifying. Something was watching them. Something that wasn't from our world. Madeline Tolentino had no idea she was about to become the first person in Puerto Rico to see it. She was restless that night, unable to shake the feeling that something was off. Her mother sat nearby, lost in thought, as the two of them listened to the wind against the house. Suddenly a shadow moved outside the window. At first she thought it was a man, someone creeping along the sidewalk just beyond the reach of the street lamp. But as her eyes adjusted, her breath caught in her throat. It was no man. It was tall but hunched, its thin, wiry body stretched tight over its bones. Its skin was grayish-green, smooth like leather, glistening faintly under the lamplight. Its arms were long, too long, ending in 3 clawed fingers that curled inward like talons. Its legs were powerful and bent backwards, almost like those of a kangaroo. And down its spine, running from its head to its lower back, were sharp, spiny quills shifting slightly as it moved. But the worst part, the thing that froze Madeline in place, it was the eyes. They were massive, black as the abyss, stretching up the sides of its skull like an insect's. They reflected the light in a way that made them seem to glow like 2 polished stones absorbing every flicker of movement. It had no ears, only 2 small holes where they should have been, no nose, just a pair of thin twin slits. It stood motionless, staring into the night. Then it turned. It looked directly at her. Stumbled backwards from the window, her mother turned to her, startled.
¿Qué es eso? What is it?
Madeline could barely get the words out. Her lips trembled as she whispered.
Yo vi al diablo. I saw the devil.
Her mother rushed to the window just in time to see the creature move, but it didn't walk. It darted, gliding like a shadow, its feet barely making a sound against the pavement. It vanished behind a nearby house, swallowed by the darkness. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then a sharp, guttural cry echoed from somewhere in the distance. Something that wasn't human, wasn't animal, wasn't anything that belonged to this world. The next morning, more livestock were found dead, throats punctured, bodies drained dry, and the legend of El Chupacabra was born.
Strange reports continue to surface in Puerto Rico where local farmers say an unknown creature is attacking their animals. Some believe it may be linked to earlier cases of blood-drained livestock, but authorities remain skeptical.
Welcome back, Toasties. Welcome back to the Dancing Toaster. This is Nelly, and on this podcast, you know we like to wrestle with the intersection of faith and the paranormal. Last week, we ventured to a small island between England and Ireland, and we examined a terrifying little creature named Jeff, the talking mongoose. This week, we're going to another small island, this one a little more tropical, and this creature is far less endearing. We're going to where my beloved is from, to the Isle of Puerto Rico, where we will discuss the infamous Chupacabra. Thank you for all your prayers and support last week. One of my dogs had to say goodbye because of cancer. We had 12 and a half beautiful years with Lucy. I took it way harder than I thought I would, but you guys know life doesn't stop lifing because we're sad. Ecclesiastes 3 says, there is a time to mourn and a time to dance. This week, this toaster has got to dance because the mortgage has to get paid. If you enjoy what I do here, it is a one-man show. You can support me at buymeacoffee.com, or you can sign up for the Patreon and support monthly. $5 a month will get you access to the brand new show, The Man-Eating Toaster. We cover darker stuff over there. We cover cults and true crimey things. We covered Heaven's Gate first. We're tackling Scientology next, so if that's interesting to you, head on over there. But enough housekeeping and e-begging. I'm taking you back to the first sighting of El Chupacabra, the mysterious blood-draining cryptid that terrorized Puerto Rico and beyond. Was it an alien? Was it an experiment? A genetic mutation? A predator that lurked in the shadows for centuries waiting for its time to emerge? Or was it something else entirely? Well, let's find out.
What on earth does Chupacabra mean in the first place?
Ah, Dr. Wright, I told you could come back this week. Hopefully you don't make me regret that decision.
Well, I feel like Mr. Harry Price from last week. My association with you has hampered my esteemed reputation, so now you're stuck with me. So please enlighten us. What the heck does Chupacabra mean?
Well, Chewbacca is a hairy Star Wars creature. Chupacabra...
Same difference.
Don't start. Chill out. Chupacabra is a compound word that means goat sucker in Spanish.
That sounds highly inappropriate.
Doctor, your mind is in the gutter, sir. The Chupacabra, El Chupacabra, is a legendary cryptid said to prey on livestock, leaving behind drained and mutilated carcasses.
Why were you talking about Puerto Rico in the beginning there? I thought the Chupacabra came from Mexico.
Many assume the creature hails from Mexico, but in reality, its earliest well-documented attacks took place on the beautiful Isle of Puerto Rico. They actually go back even further than the 90s, though. They began in the 1970s, far from the deserts of Mexico. Sightings and alleged attacks have since spread throughout all Latin America, and even in parts of the United States as well. In late February 1975, unsettling reports of animal mutilations began surfacing in the small town of Moca, Puerto Rico. Farmers discovered a gruesome scene. 15 cows, 3 goats, 2 geese, and 1 pig were all found dead, each bearing small puncture marks. It's said that when autopsies were performed, a chilling detail emerged. The animals had been completely drained of blood. Local authorities dismissed the deaths, attributing them to wild dogs, yet no conclusive evidence supported this claim. However, the sheer number of bloodless carcasses raised questions. If dogs were responsible, how were they extracting the blood so precisely? Canines typically tear into their prey, but these wounds were precise, almost deliberate. One skeptical observer remarked that while dogs are messy eaters, the attacker in Moca seemed to drink like a vampire. And the attacks didn't stop there. Just weeks later, a farmer from Barrio Cruz, Ray Jimenez, found one of his cows with its skull punctured and deep scratches surrounding the wounds. The situation worsened on March 15th when another local farmer lost 34 chickens in one night. The animal death toll climbed for weeks. The town was in a state of fear. By March 18th, the terror escalated. Hector Vega, another farmer, discovered 2 of his goats dead with identical puncture wounds on their necks. By the next morning, the mysterious creature killed 10 more goats, injured 7, and caused another 10 to go missing without a trace. It wasn't just about the numbers anymore, it was the pattern. The precision of the kills, the apparent lack of struggle, and the distinct lack of spilled blood fueled theories of something unnatural. Local newspapers of the time soon gave the mystery a name: El Vampiro de Moca, the Vampire of Moca. The town's fear fueled speculation, and soon an investigation was launched by the Senate Agricultural Commission. Experts were called in, including herpetologist Dr. Juan Rivero of Mayagüez, to examine possible natural predators.
Didn't Dr. Juan prove all this vampire nonsense was a snake?
Actually, no. This first suspect proposed was the Puerto Rican boa. However, Dr. Rivero quickly dismissed this theory. As a herpetologist, he specialized in reptiles and amphibians. He informed the investigation that not only was the Puerto Rican boa not venomous, it also lacked the ability to suck blood at all. It couldn't have been the culprit, especially in the Ray Jimenez case, because that boa couldn't possibly take down a cow.
Well, don't Latin America have vampire bats? Boom, case closed.
Slow down, Dr. Wright. There was a colony of bats found in a nearby limestone cave, though some initially thought them to be the culprits, as vampire bats do exist in parts of Latin America. After closer examination, it turned out the bats in this cave were harmless fruit bats. They were completely incapable of inflicting the damage done to nearly 100 different farm animals. They wouldn't have even attacked any animals. And we'll come back to vampire bats later as well.
Then what on earth did the investigation find?
Well, despite the commission's efforts, no definitive conclusion was reached, and the true identity of the assailant remained a mystery, mainly because, just as suddenly as the killings began, well, they stopped. By July 1975, the blood-drained bodies ceased appearing, leaving Mocha in the commission with no answers. No creature was caught, no explanation was given, just rumors of something lurking in the shadows. 2 decades would pass without incident. Then, in March 1995, a new wave of killings struck Orocovis and Morovis, just 100 kilometers from Mocha, a little over 62 miles. Farmers once again found their animals dead, bloodless, with deep puncture wounds. This time, the precision of the attacks seemed even more refined, as if the killer had learned from past mistakes. Another doctor was brought in, this time a veterinarian, Carlos Soto. Dr. Soto examined 8 victims and was totally baffled. Even though the animals had been dead for over 12 hours, they showed no signs of rigor mortis. Their bodies were soft and malleable, as if whatever killed them had done so in a way that somehow preserved their flesh unnaturally. Each animal had been killed instantly by 2 deep puncture wounds on the right side of the neck, wounds that penetrated directly into their brains. Even more disturbing was the shape and size of these wounds. Each was about the diameter of a drinking straw, perfectly round, seemingly surgically precise. By this point, the body count had risen to nearly 1,000 animals, spanning multiple species, dogs, rabbits, chickens, but one stood out as the apparent preferred prey: goats. This chilling revelation set the stage for the legend of the Chupacabra to fully take shape. It was no longer just El Vampiro de Mocha, the vampire of Mocha. It had been given a new identity. Something or someone was stalking the night, seemingly feasting on blood and vanishing without a trace.
Who came up with such a weird, inappropriate name for this made-up Chupacabra?
If you're gonna obsess over the name, Doctor, can you at least say it right?
What'd I say?
It's Chupacabra.
Chupacabra, that's what I said.
Anyways, it was Puerto Rican comedian and radio host Silverio Perez who allegedly played a crucial role in naming the creature and shaping the legend of El Chupacabra. He had no personal eyewitness testimony, but as reports of livestock mysteriously drained of blood and found with strange puncture wounds spread across the island, Perez, who was known for his sharp wit and cultural commentary, addressed the phenomenon on his radio show. During one of his broadcasts, as he and his team discussed the disturbing animal deaths that had begun in towns like Orocovis and Morovis, they noted the lack of an official name for the unknown culprit, no longer limited to Mocha. Given that the victims were often goats and other small livestock, Perez humorously coined the term El Chupacabra, which translates to the goat sucker in English, and the name stuck immediately. What began really as a radio joke quickly took on a life of its own. The term first spread like wildfire throughout Puerto Rico's media, in Latin America, and eventually the entire world. Soon, newspapers, television programs, and locals alike were no longer referring to an unknown predator. They were talking about El Chupacabra, a creature now permanently etched into Latin American folklore and beyond. But understanding where it got its name doesn't help us determine what the heck it is, or was. Even today, skeptics and believers continue to argue over what really happened in Puerto Rico. Some claim it was mass hysteria, that the animal deaths were merely coincidental, exaggerated by media hype. Others suggest a genetic experiment gone wrong, possibly linked to secret military testing in the region. And then there are those who believe the Chupacabra is something far older, a cryptid or something else that has existed for centuries, hidden in the shadows, only revealing itself when the conditions are right. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: the legend of El Chupacabra isn't going anywhere. We've now worked our way back to our opener from 1995 with Mrs. Madeline Tolentino and her mom. They were the first to claim a face-to-face sighting of El Chupacabra right outside their home. According to Tolentino, it was unlike anything she had ever seen before. She reported,
It looked like a kangaroo without a tail, walking on its hind legs like a human.
the creature had thin arms with 3-fingered hands, 3-toed feet, and dark, oversized eyes that extended from its face up to its temples. Even stranger, it had no ears, only 2 small holes for nostrils and a row of feather-like spines running down its back. The moment she laid eyes on it, she turned to her mother and whispered,
Yo vi al diablo. I saw the devil.
The description was both terrifying and puzzling. A bipedal alien-like creature with spines and dark, soulless eyes? Was this an undiscovered species or something from another world? Naturally, skeptics dismissed her account, but her claims soon gained traction. Tolentino's husband and a co-worker had their own encounter not long after, when they reportedly discovered the Chupacabra hiding in their garage. Rather than running, they attempted to tackle the creature, though their efforts failed. Inspired by the event, Tolentino later sketched a drawing of what she had seen, and her artwork quickly circulated, fueling the already growing hysteria. It's definitely worth a Google. More eyewitnesses came forward with similar reports describing the 3 to 5 foot tall creature with short but powerful hind legs, long claws, black or glowing red eyes, and a strong stench of sulfur. Some accounts even introduce new details such as small bat-like wings and scaly skin. Regardless, believers were convinced something unnatural was prowling the night, attacking livestock and drinking blood. For the longest time, El Chupacabra was limited to the quaint isle, but all this changed in 1996. By March of '96, the Chupacabra had officially entered mainstream culture. The popular Spanish-language talk show Cristina aired a segment on the creature, spreading the legend beyond Puerto Rico. Soon after, suspected Chupacabra attacks were reported in Miami, then in Sweetwater, Florida, and by April of '96, sightings had even reached Mexico. With the creature now an international phenomenon, speculation ran wilder. Was the original Chupacabra from the 1970s somehow related to the 1990s resurgence? Did a new generation of bloodsuckers emerge decades later? Or was this a case of mass hysteria with real livestock deaths being exaggerated and attributed to an infamous urban legend? Some dismiss the later sightings as mistaken identity. They insist in many of those cases the frightened witnesses simply mistook ordinary animals for something supernatural. Others insisted that the original wave of killings in the 1970s may have been legitimate, while the 90s reports were either copycats or exaggerated stories fueled by media hype. The Skeptical Inquirer, a publication devoted to investigating paranormal claims, conducted an investigation into the Chupacabra phenomenon. Patricia and Mario Mendez Acosta, 2 Mexican researchers, set out to investigate farmyards where the creature had reportedly struck in rural Jalisco, Mexico. Their efforts included setting up traps to capture the alleged creature. However, these traps consistently ensnared nothing but wild dogs. This led to the suggestion that many Chupacabra sightings could be attributed to wild dogs rather than an unknown cryptid. A police officer in the area even commented, "I don't know about the rest of Mexico or the world, but here the ghost suckers are just dogs."
Well, there you go. Any reasonable person knows that the Chupacabra was just a rabid dog or something.
This explanation did make sense to many, as many of the Chupacabra's supposed victims had injuries that may be consistent with dog attacks. But, Doctor, how could dogs leave surgically precise puncture wounds and drain all the blood without leaving a mess? I'm not convinced.
Oh, big shocker there.
5 more years pass. Chupacabra sightings spread beyond Mexico, with animal killings reported in Nicaragua, Spain, Argentina, Brazil, Chile. Farmers were desperate for answers. Then on August 30th, 2000, something happened. In the rural outskirts of Malpasillo, Nicaragua, a farmer named Jose Luis Talavera took matters into his own hands after a string of grisly livestock deaths plagued his ranch. Talavera himself lost 25 of his sheep along with 35 of his neighbors, all dead and suspected victims of El Chupacabra. Determined to protect what remained of his flock, Talavera set up a stakeout one night, armed with a rifle and an unshakable resolve. As the moon cast long shadows over his fields, he waited. Then movement. In the dim light, two figures emerged among his remaining goats. Strange, slinking creatures that did not resemble any known predator. Without hesitation, Talavera and his fellow farmhands opened fire. He later recounted,
"We shot at them from a distance. We hit one and wounded it, but they both ran away before we could catch them."
So that was it?
"Let me finish." Talavera's description of the creature was unlike anything recorded before. Its skin was hairless and leathery, reminiscent of a bat. It had a head shaped like a bull's, he said, broad and menacing. And a crocodile-like crest ran down the length of its neck and spine. According to Talavera, it stood on its hind legs and fed by sucking the blood from its victims rather than biting and tearing flesh like a conventional predator. Talavera was convinced this was no ordinary animal. Though neither carcass was immediately found, Talavera carefully followed the creature's trail over the coming days. Eventually, he stumbled upon a decaying skeleton lodged in the mouth of a cave near his farm. Here he was convinced he had finally discovered the remains of El Chupacabra. He quickly turned it over to local authorities, hoping to get some answers. Despite the farmer's insistence that he had found El Chupacabra, zoologists from the National Autonomous University of Nicaragua were far less impressed. After examining the remains, zoologist Edmundo Torres issued a blunt conclusion.
"It's a dog, without any room for doubt."
On September 5th, 2000, the results came back and the conclusion was far from what Chupacabra enthusiasts hoped for. They said the creature was nothing more than a dog suffering from severe mange, a condition that causes hair loss and shriveled, scaly skin, often giving animals a grotesque and unnatural appearance.
I knew it. I told you so.
Well, then you'll like the next one too, Doctor. Another university official, Dr. Carlos Alberto Gomez, agreed with the assessment, dismissing any notion of supernatural origins. He too asserted,
"This is a common dog. There are no fangs or anything that could suck blood."
the skeletal remains, they concluded, belonged to nothing more than a canid, perhaps a stray dog suffering from severe mange, which would account for its hairless, withered appearance.
I knew it. I told you, it's just a mangy hound. Literally a mangy hound.
Well, Dr. Wright, our farmer friend Talavera would disagree. Despite the official scientific verdict, Talavera remained unconvinced. He argued,
"The animal that was discovered in that rural zone was different from a dog."
He stood by his claim that the creature fed by sucking blood and insisted that the number of livestock deaths, at least 120 in total by now, was far beyond what a single starving dog could have done. And I can't argue with that logic.
Of course you can't.
Furthermore, he described the creature's peculiar rose-colored teeth and its bipedal stance, details that clashed with the conventional anatomy of a known dog. To this day, Talavera and other believers insist that something else was lurking in the Nicaraguan countryside, something unknown, something still out there. One particularly wild theory suggested the creature was a cross between a wolf and a crocodile, a combination that, biologically speaking, doesn't make a lot of sense. Wolves and crocodiles don't share enough genetic similarities to produce offspring. They are not of the same kind, and they aren't exactly meeting up for romantic evenings in the wild, if you catch my drift. Still, the speculation ran rampant, fueled by the mysterious nature of the killings and the grotesque appearance of the corpse. When the body was returned to Talavera, he was furious. He was convinced of a cover-up. He insisted that the corpse was not the one he had originally shot, proclaiming,
"Este no es mi chupacabras. This isn't my gold sucker."
Was it denial? Or was there more to the story? For nearly 7 years, no new physical evidence of El Chupacabra surfaced until June of 2007. On the other side of the Rio Grande, Phyllis Canyon, a naturopathic doctor and hunter, stumbled across something bizarre on her ranch in Cuero, Texas. One summer day, in broad daylight, mind you, she spotted a hairless canine-like figure with bluish-gray flesh roaming her property. At first, she dismissed it as an oddly sick animal until she and her husband began finding their chickens dead, throats torn out, completely drained of blood. As the attacks continued, Canyon set up trail cameras in an attempt to catch the culprit in action, but for weeks she found nothing. Then, towards mid-July, she received a call from a neighboring rancher. There was a strange animal matching the description of the creature she had seen, who had been hit by a car near his property. When Phyllis arrived to inspect the body, she immediately recognized it, but before she could process the discovery, another call came in. A second body had been found, even closer to her ranch. She wasted no time. She loaded the creature into her tractor and brought it back to her property. Photos of Canyon's so-called Chupacabra corpse quickly went viral. The creature's appearance was strange, but not entirely unfamiliar.
Nellie, it just looks like a sick dog.
Well, Doctor, that is what many skeptics at the time said also. Unlike the alien-esque, spiky-backed, large-eyed monstrosity of Tolentino's 95 description, this corpse had large floppy ears, canine-like features, and a body structure that clearly resembled a coyote or dog. She alleges this was the legendary Chupacabra, but Dr. Wright, many agreed with your assessment.
As they should.
They said that this was just an unfortunate animal suffering from extreme mange. Wrestling with the findings, some theorists argued that even if the body wasn't the true Chupacabra, perhaps the creature itself has the ability to infect or transform animals, leaving behind grotesque mutations.
You couldn't leave well enough alone, could you?
I'm not saying that's what I think. I'm just saying that that's what some folks were saying. But before you get too proud of yourself, a monkey wrench is about to be thrown into your assessments. Determined to prove that her find wasn't just another mange-ridden canine, Phyllis sent DNA samples from the corpse to multiple universities for analysis. When the results came back, they only deepened the mystery. She says she had the DNA processed at 5 different universities, and she said all of them came back identical, but that none of them matched any animal in the archive. That's a big claim, one that, if true, could have changed everything. If this was a new species, then perhaps the Chupacabra legend had some basis in reality after all, but without publicly available reports, skepticism remained high. Canyon initially kept the remains of the creature, storing its skull and carcass in her freezer as proof of its existence. Phyllis, you're making Texas come across a little creepy now. In the years since, she took it a step further. She taxidermied the body and has it displaying in her home, proudly showcasing what she believes to be the first ever preserved Chupacabra.
Now that just ain't right, Nellie.
Doctor, I can't argue with that. That is pretty gross and weird. Skeptics argue that every so-called Chupacabra body ever found has turned out to be a misidentified, diseased animal, most commonly canine, dog, coyote, fox, suffering from mange. But believers point to the patterns of the killings, the blood-drained corpses, the precision of the puncture wounds, and the global spread of reports as the evidence that something more sinister is at play. Is the Chupacabra real, and if so, what on earth is it? Is it a mutated predator, an alien, a failed government experiment, or a complex case of mass hysteria? I think it's high time we dive into some of the theories. Over the years, various scientific investigations have attempted to demystify the Chupacabra. While many of the DNA tests' results seem to align, they weren't exactly the way Phyllis had portrayed them, which leads to the first and most widely accepted explanation. Doctor, I'll let you do the honors. What is the most prominent theory of El Chupacabra?
Well, the Chupacabra is just a dog with mange. This theory is grounded in biology rather than imagination and folklore. It suggests that what people have been calling the Chupacabra is nothing more than wild canines suffering from mange, that nasty skin disease caused by parasitic mites. Mange causes hair loss, scaly gray skin, and severe emaciation, giving animals that eerie, unnatural appearance. When Phyllis first sent them samples from her so-called Chupacabra to Texas State University, the lab determined that it was a simple coyote with mange. A biologist from the university stated the DNA sequence is a virtually identical match to DNA from the coyote.
But Phyllis wasn't satisfied. So she sent additional samples to the University of California in Davis, and this time the results were slightly different. While coyote DNA was indeed present, it was mixed with Mexican wolf DNA, leading Canyon to claim that her Chupacabra was a unique hybrid creature, unlike anything in known records. Some cryptid enthusiasts latched onto this.
Of course they did.
They argue that an unknown hybrid species could explain the reports of strange blood-sucking predators. Others pointed out that coyotes and wolves are close enough relatives to interbreed, meaning this was a natural occurrence, not evidence of a new cryptid. Barry O'Connor, a professor from the University of Michigan, not only explained why mangy canines might appear more monstrous than usual, but why the targeting of the livestock. Animals with mange are often quite debilitated. If they are having a hard time catching their normal prey, they might turn to livestock because it's easier.
That's right, Nellie. That explains all them mutilated farm animals. Can we be done now with this Chupacabra?
But if all the Chupacabras were simply mangy dogs, how do we account for early descriptions of a kangaroo-like alien creature walking up on two legs with spines on its back? This also doesn't even begin to explain the puncture-like wounds, nor the exsanguination, the draining of blood.
Couldn't another animal account for some of the bipedal testimony?
Actually, yeah. There is another animal that's been proposed for some of the sightings, especially those in and around Puerto Rico. Over the years, some have suggested that El Chupacabra is an escaped primate.
I haven't heard that one.
Neither had I until recently, actually. Cayo Santiago, often referred to as Monkey Island, is a small uninhabited island located approximately half a mile southeast of Punta Santiago in Humacao, Puerto Rico. Covering about 38 acres, the island is primarily known for its free-ranging colony of rhesus macaque monkeys. These monkeys are descendants of 409 individuals imported from India back in 1938 for scientific research. And today, the population numbers around 1,000. Now home to the oldest wild primate research center in the world, it's funded by both the National Institutes of Health and the University of Puerto Rico. At various times, primates from all over the world have been brought to this facility for scientific study. And to add some weight to the escaped primate theory, some of these monkeys have escaped over the years. Puerto Rican zoologist Edwin Velasquez suggested that the Chupacabra attacks could have been caused by some of the escaped monkeys, possibly roaming the rural areas. He theorized that people who encountered these primates at night, often in low visibility, most likely misidentified them as something far more monstrous. He said, "Not everyone can describe a creature that they see at night, and their imagination fills in the blanks by association with other things. A person seeing one of these apes in twilight might believe that they saw a little man, thus confusing the real for the fantastic."
This is totally reasonable. I like this guy. If someone unfamiliar with primates, or just not expecting to see one, saw a large-eyed fanged creature running on two legs, they might not think monkey, they might think monster.
That is true, Doctor. This explanation makes a lot of sense when we compare it to early Chupacabra sightings, which describe the creature as bipedal, eerily human-like, and possessing clawed hands. But while it's an interesting idea, it still doesn't explain the exsanguination, the blood-drained carcasses so closely connected with El Chupacabra.
That's a minor detail.
What? Not quite, Doctor. So far, nothing has accounted for that element of this phenomenon. No snake, canine, or primate could account for the exsanguination of these animals. Even the bats that consume blood, the Desmodontini vampire bats, they don't kill their prey. Unlike the mythical creatures they're named after, vampire bats feed in a way that is minimally harmful to their host. They typically feed on sleeping livestock, birds, and sometimes wild animals. They use heat sensors in their nose to find blood vessels near the surface of the skin, and instead of biting deeply, the bat uses its razor-sharp teeth to make small, shallow cuts, often undetected by the host, so no puncture marks would be there. Then their saliva that contains anticoagulants, such as the enzyme draculin, prevents the blood from clotting, allowing it to flow freely for their consumption. The bat does not suck the blood like a straw. Instead, it laps it up with its tongue. Each session can last 20 to 30 minutes, during which the bat drinks half of its body weight in blood, leaving the host alive. The main danger comes from infection or disease transmission, especially rabies, which vampire bats are known to carry in some regions. So we're no closer to an answer or resolution than when we started. What if the Chupacabra isn't a mangy dog or a monkey, but something entirely unknown to science, as the title Cryptid suggests? Lauren Coleman, director of the International Cryptozoology Museum, believes that the rush to label the Chupacabra as a hoax or sick dog has overshadowed the possibility of a real undiscovered species. If you haven't noticed today, though, one of the biggest issues in Chupacabra research is inconsistency. The original 95 descriptions don't match the later canine-like corpses found in the 2000s. Some cryptozoologists suggest that mistranslations and media sensationalism has caused the Chupacabra legend to shift from the spiky-backed alien-like monster to the hairless, dog-like creature. Over time, the real Chupacabra legend was muddled by misidentifications and hoaxes. Even stranger, some believe the Chupacabra could be a secret U.S. government experiment.
Can't you just leave that foolishness alone?
Look, the U.S. has used Puerto Rico as a testing ground for various scientific and military experiments. One of the most well-known documented cases of scientific testing in Puerto Rico was the early trials of birth control pills conducted between 1955 and 1960. Researchers Gregory Pincus and John Rock, backed by funding from philanthropist Catherine McCormick, selected Puerto Rico as the testing site for the first large-scale trials of oral contraceptives, a drug that would later become the modern birth control pill. Many Puerto Rican women participated in these trials, yet they were not fully informed about the nature of the experiments or the potential health risks. The pills used in the study contained high doses of hormones, which led to severe side effects, including nausea, vomiting, blood clots, and in some cases, even death. Despite these alarming complications, the trials continued without adjustment to dosage or greater oversight. Ultimately, the trials played a key role in the pill's approval for widespread use in the U.S., but the ethics of these experiments have been heavily criticized, and rightfully so. Many argue that Puerto Rican women were treated as human test subjects without proper informed consent, raising serious concerns about the exploitation of marginalized communities in the name of scientific advancement. For much of the 20th century, the U.S. military used parts of Puerto Rico as a testing ground for bombs, chemical agents, and biological warfare research as well. One of the most affected areas was in the island of Vieques, located off Puerto Rico's east coast, which was occupied by the U.S. Navy for military training and weapons testing from the 1940s all the way to 2003. During this period, the Navy controlled nearly two-thirds of Vieques, conducting live-fire training exercises, bombing runs, and chemical weapons tests. Over 6 decades, the U.S. military dropped thousands of tons of bombs, napalm, and depleted uranium shells on the island. The heavy use of toxic materials caused severe environmental damage and was linked to increased cancer rates and other health issues among Vieques' residents. After decades of protests by local activists and environmental groups, the military finally ended its exercises in 2003. However, despite the cessation of bombings, the cleanup of contaminated land has been slow, and many parts of Vieques remain polluted with unexploded ordnance and lingering toxic waste. The legacy of U.S. military testing in Puerto Rico continues to affect both the environment and the health of its people. In that same vein, during the 1950s and 1960s, the U.S. military reportedly tested Agent Orange in various parts of Puerto Rico before deploying it in combat, a highly toxic herbicide later used in the Vietnam War. These defoliation experiments were conducted in multiple locations, with a significant portion of testing taking place in El Yunque National Forest, a tropical rainforest in the northeastern part of the island. The use of Agent Orange in Puerto Rico meant that both land and potentially local communities were exposed to the same harmful chemicals that later caused severe health problems among Vietnam War veterans and civilians. The long-term environmental and health consequences of these tests remain a subject of great concern, as Agent Orange is known to contain dioxins, which are linked to cancer, birth defects, and other serious illnesses. Declassified government documents suggest that during the Cold War era, the United States conducted radiation exposure experiments on Puerto Rican prisoners, raising serious ethical concerns about human experimentation on vulnerable populations. In addition to these radiation tests, there have been allegations that Puerto Rico was used as a testing site for further chemical and biological warfare research. However, much of the information surrounding these alleged experiments remains classified or unclear, leaving many questions about the extent and impact of these tests on the island and upon its people. Beyond scientific and military experiments, Puerto Rico has been used as a testing ground for economic policies imposed by the U.S. government. Puerto Rico was subjected to Operation Bootstrap from 1948 to 1965, a U.S.-sponsored industrialization effort that aimed to modernize the economy, but ultimately left the island highly dependent upon the U.S. and on U.S. corporations and led to long-term economic struggles. The Jones Act back in 1917, which severely restricts Puerto Rico's trade, is another example of how United States policies have treated the island as an experimental economic model rather than an equal part of the nation. With all of this in mind, is it really that far-fetched to think that maybe some kind of genetic experimentation could have taken place there as well? Keeping with the theme of creepy U.S. government dealings, let's travel over 3,000 miles south to Chile. Some theorists believe that the United States has been conducting genetic experiments in underground facilities located in remote parts of Chile. According to this theory, the Chupacabra may not be a naturally occurring creature, but rather a bioengineered organism, a failed experiment, or some type of escaped test subject. Reports of Chupacabra attacks in Chile have fueled speculation that one of these creatures may have escaped from such a facility, leading to a wave of livestock mutilations and strange sightings across that region. Chile has long been considered a UFO hotspot with frequent sightings of unidentified aerial phenomena. Some researchers claim that the United States operates a classified facility in Chile dedicated to studying extraterrestrial life, similar to Area 51 in Nevada. This theory suggests that the Chupacabra may not be a product of U.S. genetic research, but an alien entity, one that was either captured and studied by the United States government in Chile or originates from UFO activity in the region. If true, this would imply a direct connection between government secrecy, extraterrestrial encounters, and cryptid reports in Chile. But we'll touch more on the alien stuff next season. Another theory links the alleged U.S. facility in Chile to biological warfare research. Some believe that El Chupacabra, or at least the legend surrounding it, was created as a psychological warfare tactic to discourage people from wandering into certain restricted or classified military zones. Others suggest that strange creatures or livestock mutilations could be the unintended consequences of U.S. military experiments, possibly involving chemical or biological testing that altered local wildlife. The presence of strange hairless animals found dead in the countryside has only deepened suspicions about whether the Chupacabra legend is a cover for something more sinister. Adding to the mystery, Chilean farmers and ranchers have reported livestock killings eerily similar to those in Puerto Rico and Mexico. Victims are typically found drained of their blood with strange puncture wounds, yet no natural predator seems to be responsible. Some theorists argue that Chilean authorities have covered up evidence, possibly at the request of the U.S. government. One particularly bizarre claim states that Chilean soldiers captured a Chupacabra family, a male, female, and their offspring, in a mine north of Calama, Chile. According to Benjamin Radford, a prominent skeptic and investigator, a team of NASA scientists later arrived in a black helicopter and reclaimed the creatures, reinforcing the idea that the U.S. government may be involved in secret operations related to the Chupacabra in Chile.
Do you have anything to back up any of this insanity?
Well, despite all these intriguing claims, there is no concrete evidence to support the existence of a secret U.S. facility in Chile tied to the Chupacabra legend. While Chile has a history of military cooperation with the United States, including covert Cold War operations, no verifiable documents have been found linking the country to Chupacabra-related experiments. Additionally, the Chilean government and military have neither confirmed nor denied these claims, which has, of course, only fueled further speculation. While the theory of a hidden U.S. base conducting genetic, extraterrestrial, or biological warfare research in Chile remains an exciting piece of lore, it sadly lacks substantial proof. However, the ongoing reports of strange livestock deaths, unexplained government activity, and UFO sightings in remote areas of Chile continue to make the region a hotspot for cryptid and paranormal research alike. After decades of speculation, reports, and investigations, what are we left with?
Well, the most plausible explanation for modern-day Chupacabra sightings is that they are nothing more than misidentified canines suffering from mange. The eerie, hairless appearance of these animals, combined with their desperate and unnatural behavior caused by illness, can easily fuel fear and confusion, especially when found near dead livestock. In these cases, the mystery seems to have a rational explanation.
Well, one may say that. However, the earlier Puerto Rican sightings, those describing a bipedal creature with reptilian skin, spines along its back, and glowing red or black eyes, are harder to dismiss as mangy coyotes. We considered the theory that escaped monkeys from Puerto Rico's Cayo Santiago Primate Research Facility may have been responsible for some of the confusion. If an unknowing witness saw one of these monkeys in poor lighting, their imagination could have filled in the gaps, transforming a real but unfamiliar animal into something otherworldly. While this explanation is possible, it does not fully account for all the reports of Chupacabra, especially the blood-drained carcasses or the highly consistent descriptions given by early eyewitnesses. The idea that El Chupacabra is an undiscovered species, I think, is less likely, but not impossible. New species are discovered all the time, though most are small or isolated creatures, not large blood-drinking predators. If El Chupacabra is a real unknown animal, we would expect more physical evidence: footprints, scat, fur samples, or a captured specimen. Yet no such evidence has ever surfaced, making the existence of a hidden physical predator roaming Latin America seem very unlikely. Then there is the more sensational possibility, the idea that El Chupacabra is the result of a government experiment gone wrong. Some theorists believe that secret biological or genetic experiments in places like Puerto Rico, Chile, or the southwestern United States may have led to accidentally releasing a creature unlike anything known to science. While this is an intriguing possibility,
There ain't no evidence for it, right?
well, thank you, Doctor. There is no substantial evidence, no leaked documents, no whistleblower testimony, or scientific anomalies to support this idea. It remains entertaining, but speculative at best. Despite the wild stories and countless sightings, no physical proof of El Chupacabra has ever been found. Every so-called Chupacabra corpse that has been tested has turned out to be a dog, coyote, or fox suffering from disease, typically mange. No captured specimens, no undiscovered species, and no confirmed cryptid DNA sequences have been recorded.
Stop beating around the bush, would you? Just tell them the way to scientific evidence leads heavily toward misidentification and folklore rather than a real blood-drinking, goat-sucking predator lurking in the dark.
Thank you again, Doctor. You certainly do have a way with words. This has been one of the harder ones to find anything to latch onto, yet the legend of El Chupacabra refuses to die. Reports of livestock killings, eerie creatures in the night, and inexplicable animal mutilations continue to this day. I know I said that the alien stuff would wait until next season. I don't know if I'll ever hear the end of it, though, if I don't at least touch on the extraterrestrial hypothesis for El Chupacabra. Do I think it's something from another planet? No. Okay, we can move on. No, I'm just kidding. No, I don't at all. I don't think it's from another planet. All of the same rebuttals for it being a physical cryptid would still apply, in my opinion. Where are the footprints, scat, bodies, etc.? Some go way too far for me and merge some of these extreme theories. You got the alien folks, you got the government experiment folks, then you got the alien experiment folks also. Look, that makes for a great sci-fi horror movie, but I need a little bit more to grasp onto to go down that rabbit hole with you, if that's where you're leaning. Speaking of sci-fi horror, the 1995 sci-fi horror film entitled Species has been directly linked to modern Chupacabra lore, particularly through our opener and first eyewitness, Mrs. Madeline Tolentino. Back in August of 95, Tolentino reported the first detailed sighting of El Chupacabra in Canovanas, Puerto Rico. Remember, hers was extremely alien? She described the creature as bipedal, hairless, with large black wraparound eyes, long thin limbs, and spines running down its back. Well, this description quickly became the standard image of El Chupacabra, spreading through media reports and eyewitness testimonies. However, in those later investigations, skeptic Benjamin Radford uncovered a striking similarity between Tolentino's description and the creature known as Syl from the movie Species, which, luck would have it, had been released in Puerto Rico just weeks before her sighting. Syl, played by Natasha Henstridge, is an extraterrestrial human hybrid with grayish skin, glowing eyes, and a spine covered in, you guessed it, sharp, jagged protrusions, features that almost perfectly match Tolentino's description of El Chupacabra. When Radford interviewed Tolentino, she admitted that she had seen species before her sighting. This led Radford to theorize that her subconscious may have influenced how she described El Chupacabra, possibly merging features from fiction with reality in a moment of fear and misinterpretation. This connection is crucial because Tolentino's account was the foundation for nearly all modern Chupacabra descriptions. Once her version of the creature entered the public imagination, more witnesses began describing the Chupacabra in a way similar, further solidifying the alien-like, spiny-backed creature as the dominant image of the cryptid. While species may not have created the Chupacabra legend, it heavily influenced its modern iteration. Before 1995, Puerto Rico already had livestock killings linked to a mysterious predator that we discovered was called El Vampiro de Moca, the Vampire of Moca. Its attacks went back to 75. However, these were not associated with an alien-like creature. The Chupacabra, as it is popularly known today, only emerged after Tolentino's sighting, which closely resembled the sci-fi horror movie Species and that alien hybrid. I believe the Species movie connection suggests that the modern Chupacabra could be a case of cultural contamination, where the sci-fi horror film influenced eyewitness testimony, shaping an entire cryptid legend. This doesn't necessarily mean that every Chupacabra sighting is false, but it does suggest that the most famous description of the creature may have been inspired by or heavily influenced by Hollywood rather than reality. But there is another possibility, and our final one as we prepare to wrap all this up. What if El Chupacabra is real but not physical? What do I mean? Well, I'm glad you asked. What if the creature is purely a spiritual entity? El Chupacabra has been examined from nearly every possible angle: biological, cryptozoological, folkloric, and even extraterrestrial. But what if the creature is not a physical being at all? What if El Chupacabra is real but purely spiritual? The idea challenges the traditional perception of cryptids as hidden, undiscovered species, instead placing the Chupacabra in the realm of supernatural phenomena. If the Chupacabra is not a flesh and blood animal, then the reports of its presence, its attacks, and its terrifying appearance could stem from something more elusive, something otherworldly, not from another planet, but from another dimension, from the other side, from the unseen realm, as we like to call it. Is it possible that El Chupacabra is a manifestation of fear? Throughout history, certain creatures appear in folklore, not as literal beings, but as manifestations of deeper fears and anxieties. The Chupacabra's emergence in Puerto Rico in the 1990s coincided with a period of social and economic uncertainty, particularly regarding U.S. influence and scientific experiments on the island. Similarly, other cultures have seen phantom-like creatures appear in times of turmoil: the black dog in England, La Llorona in Mexico, or even the Wendigo in Native American legends. Could El Chupacabra be a modern specter of fear, something that is real, not in a biological sense, but in a psychological or spiritual one? Theories that link mass hysteria and cultural folklore suggest that when enough people believe in something, they begin to see it. If fear and expectation can shape hallucinations, dreams, and collective experiences, then perhaps El Chupacabra is a manifestation of this shared anxiety, taking form only in moments of heightened emotion and belief. But there's always the possibility that El Chupacabra is a demonic or supernatural entity. If the Chupacabra is not a misidentified animal but something truly non-physical, then we must consider supernatural possibilities. Could it be a demonic entity, a malevolent spirit that preys not simply on flesh but on fear as well? Throughout religious and occult traditions, there are spirits that drain energy, life force, or even blood. Some ancient vampire legends describe beings that do not physically attack their victims but instead consume their essence. Even in Christian demonology, spirits are said to torment livestock, an eerie parallel to El Chupacabra's pattern of attacks. This raises a critical question. What if the Chupacabra is not an undiscovered creature, but a spiritual predator, one that does not need to leave behind tracks or physical evidence because it exists on a different plane of reality than our own?
We can't go one episode without you butchering the Bible.
Hey, chill out. Hear me out. Throughout Christian demonology and folklore, spirits and demonic entities have long been associated with the torment and destruction of livestock. These cases often involve supernatural attacks on cattle, sheep, goats, and other farm animals similar to the mysterious livestock killings attributed to El Chupacabra. In biblical and medieval Christian traditions, malevolent spirits, often labeled as demons or fallen angels, were believed to attack animals as a way of instilling fear, punishing humans, or corrupting God's creation. The book of Job in the Old Testament, in Job 1:13-19, Hasatan is allowed to test Job by destroying his possessions, including his livestock, which are killed through supernatural means, reinforcing the belief that supernatural forces can directly target animals. I also got to bring up the Gospel of Mark. You knew it was coming. In Mark 5, Jesus encounters the demon-possessed man in the region of the Gerasenes. The demons, calling themselves Legion, beg Jesus to cast them into a herd of pigs, which then immediately rushes into the sea, and they drown. This passage suggests that demonic entities can inhabit and influence animals, causing their destruction. Fast forward through history during the European witch trials, 15th to 18th centuries. Accusations of witchcraft and demonic influence often involved reports of livestock mysteriously dying, being drained of blood, or suffering strange wounds. Farmers would find cows, sheep, or goats dead without explanation, sometimes with incisions or bite marks that could not be attributed to natural predators. In England and Scotland, some believed that witches used demons or familiars to attack livestock as a form of revenge or to gain dark power. I don't believe any investigation has been conducted to determine a possible link between brujeria, witchcraft, and El Chupacabra, our goatsucker. Oh man, when we get to season 3, you'll be surprised to learn that a lot of people who claim to have been abducted by aliens, by extraterrestrials, also messed around with sorcery and the occult. In colonial America, particularly during the Salem witch trials, unexplained livestock deaths were sometimes cited as evidence of demonic activity or witchcraft, fueling paranoia. In Germany and France, as early as the 16th century, reports of cattle found mysteriously exsanguinated, drained of blood, emerged resembling modern Chupacabra cases. This long history of mysterious animal deaths being linked to demonic forces mirrors the blood-drained livestock found in Puerto Rico, Mexico, and other Latin American regions where El Chupacabra legend thrives. Also in Christian demonology, some spirits were believed to drain the life force of both humans and animals, much like a vampire. These entities often struck at night, leaving victims weak, paralyzed, or dead without signs of physical struggle, a pattern that eerily aligns with Chupacabra attacks. The mare or nightmare demon. In medieval Christian folklore, the mare was a demonic spirit that sat on people's chests at night, suffocating them. Some legends expanded this idea to livestock, where farmers found their horses or cows mysteriously dead or weakened in the morning. Some medieval texts describe demons that drain energy or blood from living creatures, rendering them lifeless but without significant wounds or signs of external struggle. This is strikingly similar to how Chupacabra victims are described, completely exsanguinated but otherwise intact. Connecting last week and this week, Christian folklore also includes phantom animals associated with death and destruction, such as the Black Shuck in England, the Cadejo in Central America, and the hellhounds of European myth. These creatures were said to attack or haunt rural areas, sometimes killing livestock or being seen as omens of impending death. El Cadejo, a legend in Latin American folklore, describes a shadowy dog-like being that preys on people and animals in the night, mirroring some descriptions of El Chupacabra. Hellhounds, often associated with satanic or demonic entities, were believed to leave no physical evidence of their presence, only fear and destruction. If El Chupacabra is a supernatural predator rather than a traditional cryptid, it could be a modern incarnation of these ancient demon dog legends adopted for a new cultural era. Some demonic rebranding, if you will. This could also explain why they might take a sci-fi alien appearance during more scientifically engaged times. One of the most striking aspects of the Chupacabra legend is that its victims are said to be completely drained of blood, a detail that aligns with occult and demonic blood rituals in Christian tradition. Blood is considered a powerful spiritual force in the Judeo-Christian worldview and occult practices. In Christian doctrine, blood represents life and sacrifice. The Old Testament makes it clear that the life of the thing is in its blood, which is why satanic or demonic entities are often associated with blood drinking or sacrifice. In some Christian folklore, demons require blood to sustain themselves. If El Chupacabra is a demonic entity, its feeding on blood could be a form of energy consumption rather than the literal physical nourishment. This also parallels historical fears about vampires, which, in some Christian demonology, were believed to be the reanimated bodies of the damned, cursed to feed upon the living. If we accept the possibility that El Chupacabra is not a biological creature, but a spiritual one, then its patterns of animal attacks align perfectly with historical demonology and Christian folklore. It strikes at night and disappears without a trace. It drains blood like demonic entities that sap life force. It attacks livestock, just as demons and witches were said to torment farm animals. It leaves behind victims that appear untouched, except for small puncture wounds, much like the mysterious deaths in witch trials in medieval folklore. Could El Chupacabra be a modern version of an ancient demonic predator, one that has existed for centuries, merely taking on different names and forms throughout history? If so, its true nature may not be that of hidden cryptid, but of an unseen, malevolent force that has always lurked in the darkness, feeding not just on blood, but on fear itself. Unlike flesh and blood predators, spiritual entities often serve a purpose. They're either summoned, drawn to certain energies, or exist to teach a lesson. If El Chupacabra is a non-physical force, then what is it responding to? Could it be a guardian or omen warning of something greater, a supernatural parasite feeding on fear and chaos, or a mythological being reborn, reshaped by modern anxieties? Whatever the case, considering El Chupacabra as a spiritual entity opens up a completely different way of understanding the legend and lore. Instead of chasing a biological creature, perhaps we should be looking into the deeper forces at work, the ones we cannot see, but can certainly feel. Mis amigos, creo que aquí es donde debemos terminar, my friends. I think this is where we should end. Sorry to my beloved if I butchered your native tongue, as I have the tendency of doing. I don't know Spanish. I know enough to get kidnapped. I would like to thank my Puerto Rican beloved for the suggestion of covering El Chupacabra. I hope I did it justice for her and for all my Latino family and friends. Que Dios los bendiga. God bless you all. Thank you again for all your love and support. March has been awful, but you guys are always wonderful. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe, leave me a review, do all the things wherever you consume the Dancing Toaster. But whatever you do, don't consume toasters, and don't let El Chupacabra consume you. I love you. I'm out.
Report suspicious activities and call 911 for immediate response. Expect delay.
Nobody else booking taxis from the south. Stand by. Flight 022. Maintain approach. You're clear for
Expect traffic delays and restrictions. Take personal security precautions to avoid becoming a victim of an attack. Avoid crowded public areas and gatherings. Do not travel in areas affected by the attack or in a known area of elevated virus activity. Keep emergency supplies accessible and a full tank of gas at all times. Government officials insist the